All right. Thank you. I posted this a little bit late, but we're going to get into this. So first thing I want to say, happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. All right. If you didn't know it, this is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And how did I find this out? I really don't know. Probably through a calendar. But I thought to myself, what a perfect time to celebrate some culture here. Um, so this is Asian Pacific, I gotta read it, American Heritage Month. So welcome, welcome. If you don't know, on this channel, I have talked about spirituality and cult in the past, and I am now building my other channel, Ash and Ether, to essentially allow those conversations to be over there. But as we do that, of course, I need your help. You have to subscribe, you have to support that other channel so that I can, of course, be able to post live and do all those wonderful things on that channel, and then start to add some more personal things on this channel. So that is the growth that is happening here. If you're curious, if you're wondering, what are we doing here? How is it growing? What's happening here? Ash and Ether is about to be on and popping, and we see Ash and Ether is already here. And then, of course, here I want to we'll be promoting more of just personal things and things that I see that are happening. I might be doing a video pretty soon about this Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, just because it's really fascinating to me. So we'll see what comes out of it. I may or may not. I don't know, but I'm fascinated by this trial. I like watching it. It's really good entertainment, if I do say so myself. So anyway, with that being said, welcome. We are going to talk about Korean deities today, and I'm excited to talk about Korean deities. One of the things that when I first went to Korea, so I'll put it to you this way. My first introduction to the idea that Koreans had some kind of spirituality base was really through Korean dramas. I was addicted to Korean dramas. They were my life. They were what I loved. It was just this amazing thing to watch. And in Korean dramas, every once in a while, they would actually kind of throw out a little bit of a story or a myth or their older traditions. And you would see that through like the story of Gumio, which is like the nine-tailed fox. And there was a video or a movie called My Girlfriend is a Gumio, which was actually I love that drama. It was a really good drama. And then you also see a lot of mysticism, but usually they would connect it, of course, to their ancient system, right? Their ancient stories. And so that's one of the ways that they still, of course, keep those stories alive through their, through dramas and through movies. But when it comes to the actual people, when you meet the people, and when I actually went to Korea, it was hard to find anyone who wasn't a Christian, like super, super, super hard. So my icebreaker for today is this. My icebreaker for today is this. What is the first deity you learned about outside of the Abrahamic religion? So outside of probably Christianity, Islam, what's the other one? Judaism. So outside of like that main, or I'll even go here, outside of Buddhism, because Buddhism doesn't really acknowledge a deity. So what is the first deity that you learned about outside of Abrahamic religions, and I'll even throw in Buddhism there, that was venerated as a real deity? So meaning you're not learning about the deity as a myth, right? You're seeing it being worshipped and acknowledged as being real and potent right there in your face, as a real live practicing, as a deity that people are venerating. What's the first deity that you ever learned about? Okay, so if you need to, pause this video. If you're watching later, pause it, put it in the comments. Put in the comments the first deity that you learned about that was being venerated right before your eyes. So we're not talking about learning about it through books, or that it's or the idea that it's a myth or mythology. I'm talking about you see it in practice. You see that someone truly believes in this particular deity outside of Christianity and Abrahamic religions. So Kayla, you're saying that the first deity that I really took seriously outside of Christianity was Krishna, the Hindu god. All right, Aphrodite says Thor and Loki. They always teach kids about Norse gods in the UK, but were they but my question is, you learn about them, but are they in practice? Meaning, are you seeing some kind of ritual or something that says this God isn't just a story or something that happened in the past? This is alive, real, and we're practicing something that venerates this God right now. So I can say for me, so Aphrodite, tell me, like, I want to know. For me, my first deity that I learned about and saw the deity being worshipped, if you will, or venerated was Ganesha. So that was the first time I saw that outside of a deity. My friend, she was Indian, and Shiva, an Indian god. Yeah, Shiva is a god. Um, Definitely is. It was Ganesha. So my friend, she was Indian, and right above, she would do a puja every morning. And so sometimes, kids, it's weekend time, you go over to your friend's house. And so usually in the morning time, before she ate, before she did anything, she always would do a puja in the morning. And so I remember coming to her house one morning kind of early, and she had her, what's it called? Did she have a bindi? She looked real holy. That's all I can say. She looked really, really holy. And there was Ganesha right there. And that was the first, when I realized that she practiced something different than what I've seen. She was the first person I ever seen practicing a religion, like honestly and truly. And I was like, okay, well, tell me more about it. And so that was the first time I learned about a deity that was outside of, and after that it was Ganesha, but then there was more. I think Shiva was probably after that. But Ganesha was the first one that I learned about. So, because it was the whole elephant, everything, the whole nine. So that was the first deity. For those of you all who are coming in right now, the icebreaker is this. What is the first deity you learned about outside of Abrahamic religions, not even thrown in Buddhism, which you saw as a venerated deity and not just a myth, right? So you're seeing this deity as being venerated alive and not just a myth. So Aphrodite, I'm wondering, is your answer still the same? Is it Thor and Loki? Did you see them being venerated and not just as a myth, or did you actually see some kind of practice being like they're real? So that was the first deity for me. The second ones were definitely, and they came later. I was in a part of all the Indian gods then, Ganesh, Shiva, Kali, okay? For me, it came much later. First I saw Ganesha, and then later on, that's when I learned about Oshun, and I was in a ceremony for Shango and Eshu. So that was a whole thing. We were there, and I was like in it. I don't know how I got in it. I was in it. And so then that was where I learned about the other, I started to learn about, ATRs and African traditional religions. Because before that, I knew about it, and a lot of us knew about it. Anyone who watched Love Jones knew about at least Oshun and Yemaya. If you didn't know it, you were introduced to it in Love Jones. But to watch them being, worship or venerated in real life, in real time, that didn't happen until I was in Panama, and there was a ritual that they were doing there for for Shango. I think it was Shango or Eshu. So that was my first time actually being like, oh wow, seeing it in action, for real, for real. So that's my story. Sticking to it. First introduction, of course, was through Hinduism because my friend was Hindu. And came to our house one morning, she was working it out. And then the second time definitely was in that situation. So what's the first deity you learned outside of the Judeo-Christian God? There we go. All right, which you saw as a venerated deity and not just a myth. So now it's like, because we always learn about Aphrodite and all that kind of stuff, but I mean for real. So anyway, throw it in the comments for those of you who are watching later, and I want to know here now. But now we're going to get into Korea. We're going to jump into Korea. The reason why the reason why I'm asking all this is because one thing that was interesting when I was in Korea, it was so hard to find people who weren't Christian. They were hardcore Christians. And I've told the story before when I'm actually sitting in the car and they were all trying to make me comfortable. So we were on our way to a dance retreat because I was a swing dancer there, doing Lindy Hop, and we all every quarter there was like a retreat that we would all go to, and in that retreat I had to get in the car. We're driving to it out in the country somewhere. And they wanted to make me comfortable. So they're trying to find music to play. And then eventually I was just like, stop doing this. Because I could tell they were trying to like figure out what music I wanted to hear. I was like, no, don't worry about me. Just play what you want to play. So then the driver like took this big sigh, like, whoo. All right, I could finally just play my music because he was stressed out, trying to figure out like how to please me. And I'm like, please stop this. So he's like, great, I'm about to put my music on. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Why don't we listen to Hezekiah Walker for the rest of the trip? I was like, what the hell? We played Hezekiah Walker for the rest of the trip. And so that was when I realized, oh, wow. And they were all like down with it. They were so happy. They were like, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. So it was like, that was the music that was in their back pocket that they listened to in the car for trips, like Hezekiah Walker. So I was like, all right, okay, cool. This is what we're doing. So that's when I learned that Koreans and Christianity, they are no joke. They don't play around. And so it was really hard for me to find the actual, I'm like, well, what did you worship? What did you believe in before all of this, And, like, there had to be something. I mean, we have all these images and of course I'm watching the Korean dramas, so I'm seeing all of this stuff pop through, but at this point I realized for them it's just entertainment now and it's not as spiritual. But then we have these holidays that we're taking off for different things. So I'm like, well, what did you really believe in? Like, what is Chuseok connected to? What are these things connected to? Chuseok is like their Thanksgiving. It's where they actually really honor we think of it as a Thanksgiving, but it's really not. It really is. There's a lot of food there, but it's because it's food that they're giving out to the ancestors and those who have passed. So it's almost like if you think about like a Dia de los Muertos, if you think of like a connection and where we might see something similar. But on Chuseok, they have this whole big table, all this food is made, and then there's a lot of then the children, of course, are honoring their ancestors and their elders as well. You honor the elders, everyone older than you, and then the elders will give money too. It's kind of dope. They give you wealth and they bestow wisdom upon you. They bestow knowledge upon you. They give you a sense of like who you are and how they want to see you grow, and they give you like a blessing, if you will. And so that's what Chuseok is about. But there we go. So people are saying that they didn't know about Love Jones. Yes. Oh my God. So, okay. So for those of you guys who don't know about the Love Jones reference, anyone who has watched Love Jones, you have been exposed, whether you realize or not. And that's in that crucial, the poem, hey baby, it's the one that Lorenz Tate does, whatever his character's name is. He's like, are you Yemiya? Oh, hell nah, you got to be Oshun. Walk that walk, baby. Talk that talk. So that's where that comes from. So if you watch it, there's a poem that, Love Jones is really big on poetry, right? Because the guy was a writer. And it was all about, poets would get up there doing their thing. This is why I'm not into poetry. And that was one of the poems that he did. And he brings up Yemiya and Oshun. And unless you don't know, you just think he's just saying names. You don't realize that, you just learned about 2 Yoruba deities. Kind of dope when you think about it. Really African deities, right? You just learned about them in that little poem. Well, you've been introduced. So here we go. Let's talk about this. Korean spirituality. Let's talk about so in order for me to understand why I couldn't find anyone who could tell me about the deities when I was in Korea, well, I had to figure out why. Well, Christianity had taken a big hold, and mostly everyone was Christian, and which was bizarre to me, even though there were very clear rituals and things that they believed in. Yes, Dorisha, you missed it. I posted it late. It was my fault, and I'm sorry. But there was, as far as Christianity goes, there was a big hold on it, but yet there were traditions that I saw that I'm like, there's nothing about this is Christian. So you had to like kind of figure out, well, what's happening? So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of the history of how did Christianity actually get to Korea. So Christianity first came to Korea from a Korean man. So he was in China, got hipped on Catholicism, liked it so much, got baptized in Catholicism, and then from there, he changed his name to Peter. His name before, it was like a regular Korean name. I forget what it was, but Kim something. It was a name that, not wouldn't be surprising. He was like, yeah, I'm going by Peter now. So he came to, and then he came back to Korea and tried to essentially baptize other people in the religion, in Catholicism. So that was around like 1784. Yes, so it was first introduced probably around 1784 from a Korean man into Korea. So he tried to get people into it and everything, but it really, yes, people started to adapt into it. They liked it a little bit, but it didn't really take hold. And one of the reasons why it didn't take hold is because they found out that that it was a sin to venerate their ancestors. And so this idea of venerating their ancestors was a sin. They're like, yeah, this isn't going to work for us. So that's why Catholicism wouldn't really take hold too well, because essentially they didn't want, they weren't allowed to venerate their ancestors. And so Koreans, like I said, that's so strong. And even now, I just gave you the example of Chuseok. You know how important that is, because they keep that going to this day. Fun fact about that is that when I first started doing Reiki and learning about just what it means to do energy healing and all that kind of stuff, one thing about anytime you're doing energy healing and you're in someone's energetic space, you will also feel energy around them, right? So it could be a pet, it could be a this, or it could be a that, and that's a bit of mediumship, if you will. But when you're in that space, you could feel energy around them. When I would do Reiki with Korean people, I could feel their ancestors incredibly strong, like really super, super strong, more than any other group of people, because of how strong their ancestral rights are. They're so deeply connected to their ancestors that any kind of spiritual work that I used to do, I haven't done it in a while, when I'm working with Koreans, I was like, what in the world? It was almost as if like you could feel their energetic body, right? And then the whatever was alongside of them was just as powerful. It wasn't like fainting in the distance. It was like, bam, I'm right here. Okay. So that was something that was kind of really deep to me when it comes to the difference of what it means to really celebrate your ancestors. I could feel it, especially with Koreans. And so that said a lot to me about who they are. So yeah, they weren't going to give that up for Catholicism. So therefore, Catholicism just couldn't really work. But Catholicism did do some important things. And this is a few things that it did do. It helped to spread the importance of Hangul, right? And Hangul is the Korean language that we know of, and also the way it's written. Before that, the elite would be so into using still like Chinese characters and Mandarin characters, essentially. So Hangul and Catholicism, what it brought there was essentially bringing that importance of their own language. And then, of course, the way it's written. Korean language is actually really easy to read and easy to write. So Chinese characters are a little different. You had to memorize each character, so it's easier to read. So it brought all that in there. So that's something really great that came through, especially for me, because as I read some of this stuff, I'm going to have to be reading the Korean characters, because trying to read in English won't sound the same. So I actually really love Hangul. So Hangul is the Korean language. And so this actually helped to do a few things, right? Before, it was like the elite people were really into Chinese characters and using that information. Now you're starting to create a bit of an egalitarianism here, where now everyone can use the same language and there's more accessibility there. So Christianity, there was an appeal there in the first place, because now you are starting to break out of a little bit of that oppression that their traditions did try to hold, because essentially Confucianism and all that hierarchy and classism and elitism was really strong in Confucianism. But Christianity coming in, that allowed for some of that to kind of dismantle a little bit, right? And that people became to be more on even keel. So of course, certain people are going to go more towards Christianity if they're trying to break out of that kind of, was it that feudalistic and all those hierarchies? If they're trying to break out of that, Christianity seems a lot more appealing. So that's why, even though Catholicism wasn't going to work out, Protestantism did. So then in about 1884, so about 100 years later, that's when that started to take hold. So 1784 is introduced, tried to work it out here and there, not really. But now all of a sudden, you have Protestantism kind of coming through, and that became something that was helpful. So Hangul, of course, helped to spread that language out, but it was easy to learn, and then Christians used it to spread the gospel, and spread the language around the country. So this allowed Koreans to spread their language. So it Christianity, in a way, provided political freedom, right? But then it also provided another thing, and that was in 1884, Protestant missionaries from the U.S. came along and established some of the first modern educational institutions, Christian universities. So the main universities that they have right now come from this Christian background, from Protestant missionaries, right? Including AWA Women's University, which is one of the top universities, and that was created in 1886. What was happening over here in 1881? Do you remember? You probably don't know because you didn't go to Spelman. If you didn't go, if you went to Spelman, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Spelman was created around that time. Essentially, new people had to be put in the workforce. Due to wars and all this stuff that was happening, they needed to create a new workforce, and so women had to be educated. Women were needed for different things. So you have these schools that were started mostly by missionaries. Spelman College was started by two women, Sophia B. Packard and Harriet E. Giles, which were essentially missionaries, if you want to really say what they were, two white women. And then you think about over there, you have AY University, and this was started by missionaries, white missionaries from the United States. Same concept. So essentially, they used the women, going to the women to essentially establish the religion and allow it to bring up. And what did that do for women? It gave them power. It gave them a sense of education. There's a woman who said this, and they were called Bible women. They played an important role, and I'm trying to figure out her name. Her name was Kim Gang, changed her name to Dorcas. And she later testified that the day Jesus Christ was preached in Korea began the emancipation of women from the bondage of thousands of years. Okay? She first heard the name Jesus at the age of 50 and was baptized and received into full church membership in 1899. So that can kind of give you an idea of what it really means, right? What it meant for women. And so they played a part in the early spread of Protestantism. In fact, and then most of them were wives who had been neglected by their husbands in the patriarchal society of Korea. I know from personal experience, one of the first hardcore Christian women that I met essentially had become, I guess, born again, if you will, and she came from an abusive relationship. So unfortunately, the religion and some of their past ways that they did things did not necessarily support women. And so because it didn't support women, Christianity was able to take hold. So it says a lot about how you treat women and what women will do to bring something forth, and the power of women to bring a religion or anything forth if it may help them. Right? So in this situation, the Christianity was used to help the people. It helped the poor people, and it helped people who were trying to break out of that political kind of suffocation. And then, of course, it helped women. And if men are off to war and all this, while they're gone and fighting and doing all this stuff, you can essentially get the women to be like, okay, well, here you are. We're going to educate you. We're going to give you all these things. And by doing all of that, you can grow and essentially have your own. So Korea is still very, very sexist and patriarchal. Don't get me wrong. I was there. It was sometimes a little annoying. But at the same time, you have a lot of independent women who are there as well. And there's a certain kind of, way of being that, especially the older that they get, the less SHIT they take. And that's Ajumma status. Like Ajumma status is essentially, once you get there, it's a whole different world. So anyway, now you understand a little bit about the history of why did Christianity take hold and what are some of the possible reasons why it spread the way it did. But then what happened to their religion? What happened to their spirituality? What happened to all of that? Where did it go? Well, it's still there, but the people who, this is the reason why I didn't meet them. The people who really would be left behind and all of that would be who? It'd be the ones who are not educated, right? Because those educational systems to get into a college, once you get into that college, those are Christian schools. My school was a Christian school. Spelman College was. The motto was Our Whole School for Christ. our whole school for Christ, women who serve. It was a very cool, clear indoctrination of what you were supposed to be. One, be for Christ, and the other one, serve these people, right? And that's what Christianity is. That power structure. That if you serve and if you do all of this in the name of Jesus and all that, you will be given wealth. You will be given comfort. And it's not so much that anyone's given that big power, because most of the people who are in the highest spaces, they're not worshiping anything. But it gives everyone else essentially a structure to live in and be controlled in and function in. So with that being said, who is not the people who wouldn't be essentially adapting into that were the people who be on the outskirts. So that's who keeps their spirituality, their traditions going. The people on the outskirts, right? The people who are not necessarily educated. Spelman is just with one L, but yes, it was a Christian school, just one L. I know it has its faults, but we have to know that it's Spellman, which is one L. It has its faults, but I can't help it, you know. There's some investment that I put in there. With that being said, there you have this whole structure. You have this whole structure that people depend on, and the people outside that structure are going to be the ones more likely to actually support the old ways or the more traditional ways, however you want to see it. So let's get into it. Let's get into it here. Kayla, I'm just messing with you, but still, it's just one out. All right, so let's talk about more here regarding what are the deities, like what is it all called? So Mu means spirituality, right? And Gyo means school. So typically what their spiritual tradition, one of them I guess is called Mukyo, right? So Mu Kyo. Kyo, like I said, school, Mu, spirit. So the study of spirituality, the study of a spirit, the study or the school of spirit. So that's what that's called. And then you could also look at it also being looked at as, there's two words, also including Pungwoldo or Muism, right? And that's called the way of brightness. Okay. All right. And it's used by the Confucian scholar. It was used by the Confucian scholar Cho Chiwon between 9th and 10th century. And Go Shindu, which is the way of ancestral gods, and that was used in the new religious movement of Daejeongism, which was founded in Seoul in 1909 by Natul. So you have all these different, like ways, but essentially this is all kind of within the realm of their own traditions, right? And these are shamanic associations in modern South Korea, and they use the word Shindu or Mu Shindu. Remember, Mu, spirit. So shamanic way of the spirit. So Shindu really kind of, if you look at it, it goes towards the way of something. Gyo, the school of something. So Mukyo, Mu Shindu, the way of spirit. And so shamanic way of the spirits, and then of course Musogjin, people who do shamanism. Okay, all right. So with all that, there are two kinds of shamans. There's Gangshinmu, right, and those are possessed shamans. They're chosen by the spirits. And then you also have Se Sumu, right, and that means you inherit it as a shamanic trait. So there's different kinds. You also have women who will do their thing. And then, of course, you have men who mostly do it. And then gut is, in Korean, refers to the rituals. So they do rituals. So if you ever look at the Korean dramas, you'll have oftentimes they'll go to like the shaman or the spiritual person, and they have this whole thing, and they have everything all set up, and it's mysterious, and they're afraid of it. So the way that they treat their spirituality and those things that they're more ancestral to them, they treat it very much in the way that Hollywood treats voodoo. So if you think about it, honestly, that's the best way I can think about it. It's almost like, ooh, I'm going to the voodoo woman. It has the same vibes. It really does. Kind of, when you see it in their modern culture, it doesn't have that kind of elegance or veneration that I think it should. They treat it very similar to the way Hollywood treats voodoo. So let's get to these deities. And I think this is fun. You're going to see some very similar things because human beings are very similar. So our first deity here is Sangche, right? So Sangche is the heavenly emperor, okay? And therefore the king of the gods. It's through him that many humans, as way many cases in the Korean pantheon, become gods. So Sangje, that means it's a king of gods, and that's how you become God. So imagine a shaman, a Korean shaman, is going to be working really heavy with Sangche and wanting that energy, because that's going to be that energetic vibe that's going to help empower you to do your spiritual work, right? Because if that's who's supposed to give you gods. And of course, for more information, you can of course go on the Patreon, because that's where we're going to put all that information. Mirok. Mirok, he is the major creator god among the Korean gods. Through him, the world was created, but when angered, he also caused much of the world's suffering. So that's important. So Mirok reminds you of who, right? This idea of creating everything, but also creating the suffering as well. That reminds you, to me, Old Testament God. That's what it sounds like to me. So Miruk, right? And I forget the name. It was actually a close name when you look at the way that they say God in Korean. Gosh, what was it called? Me was in there as well. So very connected there. So Sokka, right? A trickster god who is involved in the Korean creation myth, becomes the first ruler of the world through deceit. Trickster gods, everyone. Did you hear that? So they have a trickster god as well. It seems like yeah, so things seems like when you think about trickster god, we've seen this before in almost every other translation. A trickster god, typically when it comes to Christianity, they'll equate that more to what? The devil. But in most other spiritual studies, you hear the trickster god really is more of like someone that shows you the different ways to do things, right? The different ways, your choices, that you have choices. So they definitely have a trickster god. So what's our trickster gods? We have Eshu, right? Some people will say Ganesha can be a trickster god at different times too, because of the different ways to do things. The leader of the ways, but really what they're showing you are your options, right? So those are your trickster gods. Okay. With that, you also have Hemosu. And he is Sangjae's son. Remember, Sangjae is like the big guy, right? And the god, and so this is the son of, and guess what? The son of is connected to the sun, the actual sun. When have we seen that? We all know. We have Osiris, we have Heru, right? We've seen this before. Ra, the sun god. So they have a sun god. He wears a crow feather headdress, carries a magic sword, and drives a chariot pulled by 5 dragons. And sometimes he is a sister of Dalnim. Dalnim is the goddess of the moon. The moon. Who is the deity? A lot of times I look at these deities, I see a strong connection to Egyptian or Kemetic deities as well. The moon. Who's the one that carries the moon up there? I see her right now. You guys know I made a video about her before. The moon, and anyway, I forget. But she's a goddess of the moon and sister to Hemosu. And one version of her myth, she climbed so high into the heavens, she reached the moon and became the goddess of the moon. So you have the sun, you have the moon. Yes, there's more sun gods to be found, and there you have the son of the higher god. Now you have Cha Chongbi, which is the goddess of agriculture, bringing the gift of farming to humankind. What's interesting to me here is that in almost all of these traditions, you're always going to see female deities and male deities, right? And what I find interesting is that with Christianity really fought to eliminate all female deities or any kind of veneration of female energy. Catholicism, of course, go for Mary, so people do Hail Marys and Ave Maria and all that, but only for the one thing, and that was for giving birth to the son. But that's it, right? Hail Mary, that's it. And that kind of sacrifice that she has. But you notice that Christianity worked really hard to eliminate all of that. Straight Panda says, not eliminate, but hide. Thank you for correcting me, because it's true. To hide it. But here, in almost all the other traditions, no one really erases the female or the feminine. It's here. And so we have the goddess of agriculture bringing the gift of farming to humankind. The gift of farming is not just Mother Earth, but the bounty of Earth, and actually knowing how to benefit from Earth, live off of Earth, and actually eat well. Now, one thing really stands out to me is the land, the farmland that exists in Korea, and how much land there is out there, and how important it is to eat the food and the vegetables, and how it is such a big part of their culture, all those fresh crops all the time. Like, I'm seeing it now. Like, you saw so many fresh crops, and it'd be similar things, but I would go into like almost like what would be like there's different kind of markets. One of the markets I would go into was like a smaller market, would just mostly have produce. It reminded me of a Korean version of Sprouts, but less bougie. Just kind of like it had what you needed, but mostly vegetables. So you go in there, it's just a whole bunch of vegetables. So that's why I used to get all my stuff. When I would go grocery shopping, I wouldn't go into a main grocery store. I would go into a place like that, and the way everything was just like this beautiful abundance of all their vegetables, and that was how I ate. I just went every week, just went there. So agriculture and nature is so important. So this is the goddess of agriculture bringing the gift of farming to humankind. Mother Earth, same vibes. Then you have the great king, right? Yomra, right? And there's different spellings here. So we have Yomna and then Yomra, the king of the underworld. Listen to this. Tell me who this reminds you of. King of the underworld, and often known for passing judgment on the dead. He leads dead spirits to their abode in the underworld, which reflects their life on earth. So I can't help but consistently see a lot of kind of similarities to Egyptian or Kemetic deities. I mean, maybe they're just the freshest on my mind, but it's really interesting. So passing judgment on the dead, leading spirits to their abode in the underworld, which reflects their life on earth. Well, I see here Osar, but I also think of Ma'at, right? Because I'm going to read to you the next one. Then you have Padi Tegi, right? Padi Tegi, the goddess who serves as guide to the underworld, leading the souls of the dead to their resting place. Because she was the only person to purposely travel to the underworld and return, she was honored as a goddess of the boundary between the two worlds. She's got Anubis vibes. So you see the king, Yama, that's what we have. Yoma is the king of the underworld, right? Known for passing. And then you switch it. That to me has Ma'at vibes and passing judgment. And then you switch it, and then you have Padateji, which to me has big Anubis vibes. What do you think about that? So there's a goddess. It's just a switch, but you have these two important roles of being able to go between two spaces, the underworld, and going back and forth. Now we also see that in Greek mythology as well. I'm trying to think of the one that does that, but you all know. Okay, then you have Samshin Hanmang, the goddess of childbirth and protector of mothers. By the way, there's so many more deities that are out there. We just took a few of them. We had found a cute little website. There's just a few of them, but there's so many more. It's ridiculous of how many more there is. But these are the ones that I think are easy to also kind of relate to, which is why I'm sharing. Yeah. And Luisa says, religion taught divide, because if you really pay attention, it's the same stuff. We're all just trying to order life. We order life into luck, fate, birth, health, physical wealth, death, and understanding all of it, education, everything that's important, it's all there. Choices, you have choices in life. So understanding the human condition, and then and having these deities that are created to help understand it and how we can focus on each little part. That's what it comes down to. We just want to understand ourselves, and that's what all these deities have been about. So Samshin Hanmang, the goddess of childbirth and protector of mothers, right? I think of Bastet a lot. I think of other deities as well, your Oshuns. I mean, there's so many that the great kind of mother energies, right? The other one for childbirth, there's another one. Who's it? She's one of my favorite ones too. Taweret. Taweret is a Kemetic deity as well. Then you have the goddess of luck and fate, and that is Gamun Jangegi. And the thing about this Kamanchang Egi. Egi typically means baby. So I'd have to look more into that and what that deity actually looks like. Because I'm like, interesting. And then there's more. Like I said, there's more. These are really just a few. We just wanted to throw some out there. And then we have Jawang Shin, the goddess of hearth and home, specifically the kitchen. Jiaowangshin Xin protects the warm center of every household, and sometimes she is viewed as a friendly goddess who visits with women in the kitchen and even offers advice and gossips with the women. The interesting about this one, whether they say it or not, this to me, this deity, it has a strong connection to also that solar plexus area, and then also what's that area right below it? Something, especially in women, your womb, the womb area. Because it's interesting. The Jiaowangshin protects the warm center of every household, and sometimes she's viewed as a friendly goddess who visits with women in the kitchen when we're creating, right, and offers advice and gossips with women. Very interesting to me. Like if I was looking at deities to connect to create, to bring new things, Jiaowangshin to me really stands out as that kind of deity, because of what that means, right? The warmth of a center of every household also has to deal with the creation and bringing forth life, and of course nourishment and all those different things. Women to me are some of the greatest artists, because if you're always cooking and creating and doing those things, that's a big part of what it means to create in general. Okay, so this is a bit of a history, and this is what some people still practice. But of course, they're going to be on the outskirts. The reality is that the problem with Abrahamic religions or the Judeo-Christian vibe is that it's very limiting. But it's a structure that people like and support because it promises them, or tries to promise you, a certain level of comfort in your physical life. And that if you don't believe in that, then you can be ostracized and pushed to the side. But if you do believe in this, then hey, you can go to the school. Hey, we can give you this job, so on and so forth. And because you went to school and all this, I'm going to acknowledge you for that. So it's really interesting the way religion really is a political maneuver, more so than anything else. And that's what we've witnessed. And so with Koreans, and which I didn't share, it's interesting to me is that it's almost like Christianity is used just for that. It's a very clear thing, because they don't really celebrate Christmas. Christmas is there, you have the lights and all of that, but it's they don't really get into it, honestly. Easter, I don't remember anything about Easter, and maybe I missed it, but there wasn't one thing I saw about Easter at all. I was there for every Christian holiday that existed, and I'm telling you, I celebrated more Korean holidays, like that really honored their traditions. But when it came time to look a certain way, have a certain level of power, demonstrate their ability to make money and all of that, that's when Christianity would really come forth. And that it seemed like the more successful that you aim to be as a professional, the more you claim Christianity. The more, and so therefore for me, since I was meeting mostly professionals, I was going to meet mostly Christians. I wasn't going to meet anything else. Right? Because anyone else would essentially be outside of the norm. And one thing about them is they're a very homogenous society. So whether they all really believe in it or not, or anything, it doesn't really matter. It's more about, we're going to assimilate to this and celebrate it on some level, because this grants me acceptance in society, which allows me to feed my children and allows me to eat and allows me to do all this stuff. Then unfortunately, there was a mistreatment of women that somehow was supported. Even though you have these female deities that I'm reading off to you, women weren't treated well. So then you have that as well. So the fact that we, as a history with the human beings, have a hard time figuring out how women should be treated allows for these kind of structures to come in to dominate the psyche of people. It says a lot. It says a lot about just who we are as people, honestly. That your ancient traditions aren't allowed to grow and mature and benefit all people. And instead, they were almost corrupt enough to where another structure could come in and take it over. That's deep to me. That's really deep. So anyway, let's do our Moment of skepticism. Can shamanism be revived to its former glory in modern times? Could it be a significant practice today? That's my moment of skepticism. After everything I just said, can shamanism be revived to its former glory in modern times? Could it be a significant practice today? All right, this is what my thought is here. No. It can't be revived as was. And I think that's the biggest problem with African traditional religions and everything that people try to revive. No. The reason why I say no is because you have to evolve them. I think if they were strong enough, they still would be in practice by the masses. If it was benefiting society enough, it still would be in practice by the masses. And so I think that they were failing. I'm going to say this honestly. I think that they were failing the group and the people because they were not growing with the people and evolving with people. And so could shamanism be revived to its former glory in modern times? Could it be a significant practice today? It's no if it's just as it was, and I'm kind of adding to my answer. And yes, if you completely overhauled it and evolved the meanings of all the deities that exist. Does that make sense when I say that? Because if it were so great, then that's what would be alive and well now. I totally understand. I totally understand everything that we see. Hold on, Risha's saying something interesting, but yeah. The book show, American Gods, is all about this stuff. How would gods evolve in the new land? And then I agree, too disconnected from nature, but with some adjustments. Yeah, there would have to be a lot of adjustments made because I really feel that the overhauling of Christianity happened because it could and because there were weaknesses. And it sheds a lot. Like if you want to know, well, what happened? Why did women were some of the biggest, supporters and spreaders and evangelists, essentially. Why? Because the former system wasn't serving them. So as much as we love to look back and be like, oh, this was so great. Well, why didn't it work? You need to ask yourself those questions. And then if it were to work now, how? Because I think about this show. So that's my answer. But I also think about this show. What's it called? The one that shows all the corruption of it all. What's that show, you guys? The most bizarre. I made a video about it, and because the main character will stare into the camera a lot and like with big eyes all the time, and The Handmaiden's Tale. I think that's the one where it's pretty much a dystopian kind of view. That show to me tells a lot about where we're at in many ways. But yeah. Anyway, I have to watch. I know more episodes will come out. So that's my answer there. And so we finished that part. Hope you guys enjoyed this little history tale, and happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Magic.